One of the most interesting, crazy, incredible cases of American jurisprudence deals with Scottsboro. Again, you can't understand unless you've got the context of the Great Depression. You have folks riding the rails looking for work just because they can't afford to, I'll go find this job here. So they're just hopping on a train and riding in, trying to find work wherever they can find work. Well, what happens in the Scottsboro case is you have 9 black teenagers, and some of them get in a fight on the train with a couple of white guys. The train stops in Scottsboro, because this fight has broken out. As they're getting off the train, as the sheriff's folks are there, the white guys get off, the black guys get off, and then 2 white women get off. And the townsfolk are looking around going, oh. And the white women, because you've got black guys and white women in Alabama in the early 1930s, I believe 1932. It's like, whoa. And the women, Victoria Price and Ruby Bates, yell rape and say that these 9 black teenagers raped them. The town immediately took the 9 kids, hauled them in jail. There was a 1-day trial for these 9 kids that ranged from the age of like 12 or 13 to 17, known as the Scottsboro Boys. In this trial, Victoria Price described a horrific rape. Well, the problem was that the doctor who had examined these women said, there's no evidence of rape here. But that didn't stop the jury. The doctor now didn't testify that there was no evidence of rape, but it was very clear that he knew there was no evidence of rape. And he had told folks there was no evidence of rape. These 9 black teenagers were convicted, and rape was an executable offense in the 1930s. And so in a 1-day trial, 8 of them were sentenced to die in the electric chair.
Of the 9, only 4 had known each other before their arrest. Charlie Weems, the oldest, was 19. Eugene Williams, the youngest, 13. Willie Roberson suffered from syphilis so severe he could barely walk. Olin Montgomery, nearly blind, had been looking for a job to pay for a pair of glasses. Clarence Norris had left behind 10 siblings in rural Georgia. Ozzie Powell had been found riding alone. Andy Wright, 19, and his 13-year-old brother Roy had ridden from Chattanooga together. It was Roy's first time away from home. Haywood Patterson had been riding the freight train so long, he said he could light a butt in the wind from the top of a moving car. Ruby Bates, 17, and Victoria Price, 21, hailed from the cotton center of Huntsville, 40 miles from Scottsboro. They worked together in the poorest of the town's textile mills. At 21, Price was already twice married and had served time in the workhouse for adultery and vagrancy.
Ruby Bates is totally different. Very quiet, soft-spoken. In effect, it was a kind of relationship in which Victoria totally dominated Ruby Bates.
The trials of the 9 defendants for rape got underway on Monday, April 6th, in the Scottsboro courthouse. It was a traditional trading day in town, but the usual crowd was swelled by thousands more from hundreds of miles around. Eventually, the largest crowd in Scottsboro's history squeezed into the courthouse square. As the trial began, Victoria Price took the stand and told a chilling story. Ruby Bates corroborated her friend's story in every detail, though she could not identify any of her attackers. Unable to get a lawyer in Scottsboro, the 9 accused rapists were being represented by a Chattanooga real estate attorney hired with $60 scraped together by the parents. The defendants had just one 20-minute meeting with their lawyer, during which he urged them to plead guilty. Now, the boys were the only witnesses called to testify in their own defense. Clarence Norris and Haywood Patterson were the first two to take the stand.
The courthouse was full of people, and they were jumping about the seats with pistols. Nothing wasn't a black person around nowhere. Everybody was white, but just us 9.
When they announced the verdict of guilty, people ran out, and the judge was trying to bring order, and as soon as the word got outside, the crowd outside went crazy.
Now, there are multiple problems with that story. One, Ruby Bates, one of the women who had yelled rape, recanted, said it didn't happen. Another part of the problem was that first the Communist Party's legal wing hopped in there and took this case up to the Supreme Court to try to protect the Scottsboro boys. Then the NAACP hopped in it. But a major Supreme Court decision was the Powell v. Alabama decision that came after this. Because think about this. You're on trial for your very life for a crime that never happened. Well, what happens now that they've got a real legal team is that they began to construct the train and found out that many of the Scottsboro boys weren't even in the same car as the women. So how can a rape happen if the guys aren't in that car? They were convicted once again. Case goes back up to the Supreme Court. By the time there were so many egregious constitutional errors in this case that by the time the Scottsboro case is done, and eventually they start getting let out one by one by one by one, it took first 18 years for the last one. Imagine being in prison, in an Alabama prison. You are 17. You get out when you're 35 for a crime that never happened. A crime where one of the women has recanted. A crime where the evidence demonstrates that you couldn't have done this thing.